I rented a quiet room to escape the noise of my life, never expecting the room owner's kindness to echo louder. In his coffee-scented kitchen, a stranger became a lighthouse. This is how Elise turned into a lifeline, and two hesitant hearts found home together. Against a soft autumn. If this story warms you, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps gentle love reach hearts everywhere today, always. When I met my room owner, I didn't know what I was really asking for. I thought I wanted square feet and quiet nights, a little window where the late sun would fall in a square I could stand in when my thoughts felt like a crowded bus. I told myself I wanted a clean bathroom and a lock on a door, but what I really wanted was steadiness. I didn't have the language for it then. All I knew was that my chest had felt hollow for months, like a room someone moved out of but never cleaned, and I needed to fill that emptiness with something kinder than worry. The house sat 3 blocks from the harbor, where gulls traced lazy loops and boats rocked like sleepers counting breaths. The maple out front had already gone red by the time I pulled up, heat still rolling from my car like a tired sigh. The porch had a swing and a small wooden sign by the steps that said, "Welcome." It was not a fancy font, not a Pinterest attempt. It looked like a person with a strong hand and a careful heart had painted it between sips of coffee. I stood there with my duffel bag, my printed directions, and the tightness we keep in our throats when we're trying not to hope too hard. He opened the door before I could knock, like maybe he had seen me arrive or he was the kind of man who listened for footsteps on his porch. "You must be Jacob," he said, voice steady, warm. He was taller than I'd expected, with gray at his temples and a soft blue shirt rolled at the sleeves. His eyes were the patient color of bay water at low tide, not flashy. Just honest. "I'm Sam," he said. "Come in out of the wind." Wind wasn't what the day had exactly, more like an early fall breath that had puffed its first coolness from some distant lake, but I stepped in as if rescued. The house smelled like coffee and lemon oil, the kind of scent that says someone cares for wood and small corners. A dog thumped a tail somewhere and then rounded the doorway, golden and grinning. "This is Gus," Sam said. "He's harmless. Loves biscuits and old baseball games on the radio." I put my hand out and Gus leaned his head into it like we'd been trying to find each other all week. "I love old baseball games too," I said, and heard my voice sound lighter than it had in a while. My chest, the empty room one, had a little picture hung in it, something from another life, and I had the sudden thought that maybe I could put more things on those walls, one careful nail at a time. Sam showed me the room, which wasn't big, but had a wide window with a ledge deep enough to sit on if you tucked your legs up. A quilt lay folded on the foot of the bed. It looked like it had taken someone years and something like love to stitch. "This was my grandmother's work," Sam said, when he noticed me running my fingers over the tiny points. "She taught 2nd grade for 41 years. She quilted to steady her hands and her mind." "Steady," I said, as much to myself as to him. "That's a good word." "The rent includes utilities," Sam went on, practical. "I ask folks to help with trash and snow if we get a storm. There's laundry in the basement. I cook most nights, so if you like to join me, you're welcome. If you want to keep to yourself, I'll try not to take it personally." I smiled at that. It was exactly the balance I hadn't known how to ask for. A doorway I could step through and a doorway I could pass by without guilt. "I'll probably be quiet," I said. "At least at first. I've had a lot going on." Sam nodded the way people do when they've done living, not just read about it. No explanation needed. "We all have seasons. I try to keep the house a calm place. Gus and I take our walks. I fix what breaks. I listen to the radio too loud sometimes on Sundays." He glanced at me, and his smile lifted only one side of his mouth. "You'll get used to my habits, or tell me to knock it off." He left me to settle in. While he brought up a second chair and a small lamp he said had a softer, light for nights when your mind won't turn down. Didn't tell him that most nights recently had been like that. "How do you say to a stranger who holds the door and speaks in good sentences, 'I ran here'? My heart is tired. Everything I took as certain softened underneath me these last months. My job got cut. The person I thought I'd build a life with decided my slow, steady love wasn't the right kind of bright, and I am trying to build a raft out of the day's ordinary things. Instead of saying all that, I asked where to get good groceries and whether the spots downtown had parking. He told me about the market with the nice strawberries where Ms. Alvarez always tucked a few extra berries at the bottom of your bag like a secret. He said the bakery on the corner did a cinnamon roll you had to share even if you didn't want to. He described the harbor walk and the coffee place that brewed a batch so dark sailors probably used it to patch sails. He talked with affection for the town, but not with blind faith. He knew which alley to avoid after dark because the teenagers liked to gather there and leave their energy. He knew the name of the crossing guard who told everyone to hustle it up, even when there wasn't a car in sight. He knew, and this mattered to me in a way that made my throat tight, that the world was a little messy but worth our best manners. The first night in the room, I lay on the bed and listened to the house learn me. The heat sighed on and off. Gus shifted in the hallway. Somewhere downstairs, Sam closed a cabinet with care, that absent-minded care of a person who knew the sound of his own home and didn't want to disturb its sleep. My phone lit up and I watched it until it dimmed. No new messages. My past had stopped knocking, which was a relief and a small grief both. In the morning, I woke early to light stretched across the wall like someone's patient hand. Outside, leaves jumped and settled, their colors insisting that change could be kind. I came down to the kitchen to find Sam at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He slid one toward me without ceremony. "There's oatmeal if you want it," he said. "I make it slow with milk and a little salt." "People forget the salt. It's important for the flavor." "My grandmother said the same thing," I told him. I wrapped my hands around the mug and felt my throat smooth. She used to say anything made with patience tastes like more than itself. Sam's eyes warmed. Smart woman, she was. She wore a necklace with a locket she never opened in front of us. When I was little, I thought it had magic in it. When she was gone, we found a tiny pressed forget-me-not inside. He listened like his day had space for hearing that. "My mother kept movie ticket stubs in her wallet," he said. "Not for the films she loved, for the ones my father slept through. She said that was where their marriage showed itself, in the patience they had for boredom." We ate oatmeal with raisins and walnuts. He asked if I needed help finding the DMV. I told him I'd figure it out after work. He nodded and reminded me that if I backed too far down the driveway, the hedge would jump out and scratch the car. It was such a small local warning I felt suddenly included in a small local logic. I laughed, and it sounded like a well that hadn't echoed in a long time. The days found a rhythm. I learned the kitchen drawers. I put my cereal on the second shelf. I found a place for my coat that didn't steal the space where Sam's hung. I took my coffee mug to the porch in the evenings and watched the way the light left. Gus sat at my feet and sighed like an old man who knew something and was trying to decide whether to tell it. Sometimes Sam joined us. We didn't always talk. Still, something was happening between the three of us, man, dog, that I recognized as trust. It didn't splash. It seeped, warmed, stayed. About a week in, I got a text from my ex. "Hey, hope you're good." That was all. It knocked something off the shelf inside me. My breathing changed without my permission. My hands went cold, though the room had not. I put my phone down like it was a glass I'd almost dropped. Sam was at the sink, rinsing plates. He glanced at me, then back at the plate, then at me again. "You okay?" he asked, soft. I nodded too fast. Yeah. He dried his hands on a towel and leaned his hip against the counter across from me, giving me space to say nothing, room to say everything. I chose a little middle truth. That old life is still loud in my head sometimes. He tilted his chin. It fades. Not like a bad song just stops and a good one starts. More like you find a better station, and even when static slips in, you remember what you wanted to hear. He paused. When my last relationship ended, I kept expecting to wake up and feel like myself again. Took me longer than I liked to understand that who I was had changed on the way through. "You loved him?" I asked, then blushed. Some things we want to know feel nosy coming out of our mouths. "I did," he said, not sorry to say so. "And I lost him in a way that stuck. We wanted different lives. He wanted the city every night. I wanted a place where I knew the mailman's name. We tried to be both for a while. It's hard to be two people in one body." He smiled a little. It was a clean end, not cruel. But clean endings still bleed. Gus came over then and put his head on my knee, and I put my hand on his head as if he'd been trained for that. If I'd thought to ask for it, what could I have said? Please let my room owner be a man who gives me space but doesn't leave me there. Please let him know how to talk about loss without making it a contest, and love without making it a promise he might regret. One Sunday, I found Sam in the backyard by a workbench under the elm. He was planing a piece of maple, and the curls of wood fell like soft shells around his boots. His forearms worked quiet and certain. "I was thinking about building a shelf for the upstairs hall," he said. "Something to hold those paperbacks that keep falling off the end table." I stood on the grass and watched him work. "Where'd you learn this?" He shrugged one shoulder. "A little from my dad, a little by breaking things and trying again." "I've got a lot to learn," I said, thinking of more than wood. He handed me a small length of sandpaper, the fine kind you finish with. "Start with this," he said. "You'll get the feel of the grain." We worked in companionable quiet for an hour, and when we went inside, Gus patted after us like he'd been consulted on the project. We set the new shelf by the stairs, and it fit like a solved puzzle. The tail end of afternoon slid through the window and caught the grain, and I realized at once that yes, here was the steadiness I hadn't known how to ask for. Not because nothing would ever tilt, because someone would straighten the frames when they did. We fell easily into a pattern that felt like music you hum without noticing. Two people who shared space with respect and small kindnesses. I took the trash to the curb before work. Sam shoveled the steps when it snowed, even when I told him I'd do it after my shift. I stopped at the market on Thursdays and picked up a loaf of the bread he liked. He left an extra set of earbuds by the radio for me the night I admitted I slept better with a baseball game in the background. And then, one Friday, the small giving and receiving found a new edge. We were on the porch, the summer giving way to a crisper evening where the air smelled like apples even when there weren't any around. I had told a story about my first job, the way my boss used to whistle the same 3 notes over and over until you felt like your eyelid might twitch. Sam was laughing, the low, real laugh he had that always felt like something sturdy being said on a wooden table. His laughing slid into quiet, and then he said, without quite looking at me, "You have a good way with people. You make it easy to be honest." I looked at his hand where it rested on the arm of the chair. It was not a young hand. The skin showed a map of places tools had pressed or kindness had come to stay. I wanted suddenly to lay my hand over his to see if the map made sense to me. I wanted to tell him I was glad to find the steadiness I had in this house was attached to a person with eyes like bay water and a dog that knew when to place its head on your knee. I wanted to say that I didn't know what it meant yet, but something had begun in me that felt like standing in a doorway looking at a night sky, both small and full in the best ways. "Thank you," I said instead. He nodded. "That thing you said about patience making things taste like more than themselves, I've been thinking about that." I waited. "Feels like this house is learning a new patience," he said, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to say my name, as if that would make it more particular than he was ready for. I watched the street lamp come on with a quiet click. "Me too," I said. "We let it hang there. It was too early to grab it with both hands, but it was also too honest to drop." In November, the first real storm blew off the bay and took the lights with it around dusk. The sudden dark drew us together into the kitchen like magnets. Sam found candles in a drawer, the good ones that didn't smoke, and set them in the hurricane lamps he kept for this exact purpose. Gus did a small, worried circle and then settled near my feet with a sigh that seemed to say, "Well, okay then. We made sandwiches by candlelight." The small way the mustard caught the tongue more interesting in the dark. Outside, the wind talked nonsense like wind does, insisting it had important news when really it was only noise. Inside, we sat across from each other with the candles making our faces look like people in old portraits. Sam said, "It always makes me feel like the world is farther away when the power's out." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. "Depends on the day," he said. "Tonight it feels like we're at sea, but we've packed well." We listened to the radio for updates. We put the plates in the sink and then felt silly doing it when nothing else was humming. In the living room, the wind banged at the loose shutter on the far side. I startled. Sam stood, set his hand on the back of the couch near my shoulder, not on me but close, and said, "It'll hold." "It always does?" I asked. Most of the time, he said, and I could hear a lot of life tucked in that most. We settled under a blanket on the couch, not touching it first, not because we didn't want to, but because the distance was part of how we were trying to be good. The air felt like it does when you're listening to a heart you're not yet allowed to know. Somewhere, a branch hit the roof and rolled. I flinched, and Sam, almost without thinking, slid his hand to mine. His fingers were steady. Mine were not. He waited until I matched him. It took a breath. It took two. I want to be careful, he said, voice very low. Not over the storm, just to me. You're my tenant. I'm your room owner. That matters. I don't want you to feel any kind of pressure here. Not about dishes, not about your sadness, not about this. I know, I said, and I did, and I didn't. I knew the kindness of the boundary he was drawing, even as I wanted to step across. I want to be careful, too. Sam, I feel... I stopped. The storm shifted. The house creaked. Gus, loyal shipmate, lifted his head and put it back down like a gavel. I feel better with your hand there, I finished. Nothing else. He exhaled a small sound I could feel more than hear. Me too, he said. We sat like that until the wind ran out of things to prove. The lights pinged back in at midnight, the refrigerator making that little relieved groan appliances make when they get to be themselves again. We looked at each other in the new bright like we'd been two people in a painting and had just stepped out. The blanket had drifted down our knees. Our hands were still matched, not tight. Just sure. I'll make cocoa, he said, like it was not a treaty but a choice to be warm. That night, lying in bed, I counted breaths until I remembered his hand and stopped needing to count. We didn't talk about it the next morning, not because we were pretending we hadn't done it, because we were two men trying to do this right. That afternoon, a small mirror fell off the hallway wall and the frame cracked. It felt like a metaphor come to life, but Sam only carried it to the workbench and said, "Nothing we can't fix." And we did. December brought more cold and a few invitations. My co-workers at the community center invited me to a holiday potluck. I invited Sam. If that's okay, I added too fast. I mean, if it's not weird. You can say no. You don't need to be my +1 to an event with crockpots and Secret Santa soap. He smiled, the corner of his mouth doing that lift I'd already learned. I like crockpots, he said, and middle-of-the-room conversations with quiet endings. He glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Let me bring the rolls. I do a good butter and salt, and a silly napkin fold. We went, and it felt easy. He knew how to talk to my coworker Lydia about her son's science project like the boy's volcano had saved a village. He knew how to listen to Mr. Jansen talk about his cataract surgery without making it about his own past surgeries. He laughed with his head tilted back when the only vegan dish turned out to be a slammed-together salad that could have used a few more tomatoes. We drove home with the heat too high in the car, both of us a little goofy from the warmth. Gus greeted us like we'd been at sea instead of 2 hours away. It felt like a family rotated its axis an inch and found a better balance. On Christmas Eve, we didn't go anywhere special. We bought a small tree and put it on the landing where the sun could find it in the mornings. We hung the ornaments that our lives had collected, the glass ball that had belonged to Sam's mother, a lopsided paper star I confessed I'd made in 4th grade and kept for reasons I didn't fully understand, a tiny lighthouse I'd found at the thrift store by the harbor. We ate soup and bread and read to each other from a book of stories we took turns picking. We didn't kiss. Not that night. We did sit close enough that our shoulders felt the outline of one another. We said good night at the bottom of the stairs, me going up, him going down, like something old-fashioned and braver than it might look. The first snow that stuck came the day before New Year's. The town got quiet in that way a snowfall can hush the mind of a place. Sam and I bundled up, pulled on hats that made us laugh, and took Gus around the block. The neighbor across the way, Mrs. Franklin, waved from her porch and shouted, "Walk faster, you'll warm up," which I took as a blessing. We came back in with our breath still fogging and our cheeks some color named after a fruit. Sam took my gloves and set them near the radiator to dry, the kind of gesture you write yourself to sleep with years later when you're trying to remember what mattered. At midnight on New Year's, I was asleep on the couch under a quilt I had not intended to fall asleep under. Sam woke me gently, his hand on my shoulder. "Hey," he said. "It's midnight." I came awake and smiled before I knew why. We were the kind of people who thought midnight was an appointment we should keep, the ritual of marking time like a quiet prayer. We counted down with the radio 10, 9, and when we reached 1, we looked at each other, not at a screen. I felt something move in me like a new tide. I put my hand up, cupping his cheek, asking with my eyes. He answered with his, and we leaned in very slightly, as if anyone watching would have to lean with us to notice. The kiss was gentle, unhurried. No fireworks. Just two grown men who had built a steady raft, testing whether it would hold our weight. It did. When we pulled back, we were both a little flushed, a little human. Gus thumped his tail, and we laughed quietly like we were sharing a secret with the lamps. "Happy New Year," Sam said. "Happy New Year," I said back. The words as simple and brave as I could make them. We didn't pretend that fixed everything either. The next morning, he knocked on my door, waited until I said, "Come in," and sat on the edge of the reading chair. "Jacob," he said, name careful, "I care about you. I also care about keeping this fair. You're my tenant. I need to know you're not going to feel trapped by that." "I thought about moving out," I blurted, then wished I hadn't said it like that. He nodded, eyes doing that Patient Bay water thing. "I wondered if you had. I would help you move. If that's what you want. I want you to have choice every step." I took a breath and thought about the crust of snow on the porch rail and the groove in the cupboard where the cereal box nudged the shelf and the way Gus leaned into me when the garbage truck banged. I thought about the steadiness that had become a current in my days. "What I want," I said, "is to build this carefully. And I want to not run from a good thing just because there are tricky edges. What if we do both hard and kind? We could write down boundaries like reasonable people who love comfort and clarity. We could go on actual dates that happen outside this house. We could promise to tell each other if it feels like a bad idea. And if at any point my staying here feels wrong, I will be the one to bring up moving. Not because I'm scared. Because I want to be brave about us." His shoulders lowered like he had been holding breath and decided it was safe to let it go. "I like a plan that we can read aloud," he said. He smiled then, full and not just the corner this time. It made him look younger, or maybe just lighter. "Tonight," he added, "I am taking you to that diner out on Route 1. They have pie that will make you loyal for life. We will sit in a booth, and I will ask you questions, and if they play songs from my high school years, you're allowed to laugh, but not too much." We went, and the pie was as good as promised. He asked me about the year I had moved to the city and the look on my face when I saw the first snowfall in a place where the light hit the buildings like something from a movie. I asked him what he would have been if he hadn't become what he was, and he said, "I would have been a man who learned to put things together, whatever the tools." And I believed him. We walked to the car under a sky that wanted to be full of stars, but had a lid of cloud instead. It didn't matter. We were learning to find wonder even in the covered nights. We kept it steady. We talked more. We ate a meal out each week, like we were trying on the idea of us in a mirror, checking different angles. We watched old films on Saturdays, both of us picking ones we thought the other had missed. I picked a quiet drama where nothing much happened except two people tried their best to be kind in a small town and sometimes failed. Sam chose a comedy with ridiculous lobby card art that made me groan and then laugh for real. We held hands, and every time we did, we checked in with our eyes as if to say, "You?" Yes, Valentine's Day came and went without either of us making a big deal of it. We both worked late. When we got home, there was a small vase on the kitchen table with 3 tulips. Yellow, cheerful, not fussy. "They were by the register," Sam said. "They looked like they had good manners." "They do," I said. And we let that be our celebration. The flowers looking around at our house and nodding as if to say they were happy to be included. Spring tucked in and then stretched out. My mother called and asked if she could visit. "I want to see where you are," she said. "I want to put my hand on the walls and say thank you to the place that's giving you your breath back." I told Sam, and he said, "Tell her I'll make lemon bars if she likes citrus." "She likes anything that tastes like it was made by a person," I said, and he smiled. My mother came with a small suitcase and that scent she always carried, soap that didn't apologize for being soap. She hugged me long. She hugged Sam like she had decided to like him 10 minutes before but was pleased to find she was not wrong. She sat on the couch with a napkin in her lap and told him stories about my childhood that involved me knocking over potted plants with frisbees. He told her about the mailbox he finally fixed after years of it leaning like a tired man. She watched the way I watched him. Mothers notice what you love, even when you think you're being cool. On her second day, she and I took a walk to the harbor. We stood by the railing and let the wind rearrange our hair. "He's good to you," she said, like it was a simple fact, like the ocean was right there. "He is," I said. "And you are good to him," she added, looking at me with her particular mother's kindness. "It shows in the way he stands up straighter when you come into the room." I laughed and didn't deny it. "We're trying to be careful," I told her. "There are lines." "There are always lines," she said. "The trick is not to pretend there aren't any, not to make it a grand romance that doesn't have bills and schedules and weather. The trick is to draw them together." "Together," I said. It felt like a word that had been waiting for me. By summer, we had made it the better part of 3 seasons without trampling what made the beginning feel special. We had a rhythm and a way of stopping to check that the rhythm still fit. We had small fights too, little ones that never made us mean. Once, in July, we snapped at each other over whether to buy an air conditioner for the upstairs. Sam thought fans did enough. I thought I might melt. We bickered, and then we cooled down, and then we went to the hardware store together and came home with a unit we both laughed at for being both more expensive and more efficient than we'd planned. We installed it sweating and swearing gently, and then we lay on the floor under it like pilgrims, grateful for modern miracles and the way our stubbornness looked like love when we set it down. There were moments that took my breath. They weren't dramatic. I've learned most of love's better moments don't look like they do in movies. They look like Sam putting my favorite mug in the cabinet so the handle faced the way my hand found it at 6 in the morning. They looked like him leaving a sticky note that said, "You're more than the worry you woke up with," on the bathroom mirror on a day my eyes were already wet. They sounded like the radio murmuring a ball game on a Sunday afternoon while we both read separate books in the same room. They looked like the dog's gray muzzle resting on my knee and Sam's hand, as certain as always, smoothing the fur while he asked me what I thought about getting away for a weekend to a cabin by the lake where the sun supposedly hit the water like a promise. We went. And in that rented cabin with a leaky tap and a porch that needed sanding, we made breakfast and not grand vows. We took a rowboat out and brought it back without tipping over. We kissed without hurry on the porch after dinner while the fireflies suggested it was time for the world to soften. I remember thinking that if I had to define real contentment, I would not describe a peak or a finish line. I would describe that porch with Sam's heartbeat under my hand and his laugh somewhere low in his chest when a mosquito decided to love him more than me. In August, I got an offer from a clinic in a city 2 states away. It was a good offer, the kind where the salary makes you swallow and the benefits make you feel like someone put a soft blanket over your shoulders. I didn't say yes. I printed the email like an old man and stared at it. Sam found me at the kitchen table, copy in hand, eyes unsure. I told him the details, and then I waited for whatever the right reaction was supposed to be. "Good for you," he said first, hands on the back of a chair, as if he needed something steady to hold. "You deserve to be wanted. You are good at what you do." "And?" I asked with a shaky laugh. "And I love having you here," he said. He rarely said love, not because he didn't feel it, because he saved words he'd worn thin over years by only using them when he meant it. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to hold you here if you're meant to go." We sat with that. We were not romantic heroes. We were 2 men with a houseplant that needed watering and a dog that needed evening walks, and a mailbox that finally stood up straight. This was the kind of choice adults make. Not dramatic, but heavy enough to teach your spine something new. "What if we don't rush?" I said at last. "What if I ask them if I can start later? What if I go for a few days to see how it feels? And what if I hate it? And what if that tells me something? What if our love is not a door but a set of keys, and we figure out which ones open which days? He smiled, tired and moved. Keys, he said. I like that. I went for 3 days in September. It was a good city. The clinic was run well by people who cared about care. I liked the light in the afternoon across the waiting room. I liked the way the coffee place on the corner knew how to spell names without asking. I did not like how the night sounded without the harbor's hum. I slept, but not the way I slept when I heard Gus do his slow circles and Sam click off the lamp in the living room. That small sound like someone saying, "We had a good day," even if it had been hard. I called Sam each night and we talked like we were dating across distance, which is to say we tried to be both real and cheerful, and those two things pulled at each other. The morning I drove back, I cried a little at a rest stop and dabbed my eyes with the brown paper from a bag, because that's what I had. When I pulled into the driveway, Sam was on the porch, not like he'd been waiting there the whole time, but like he'd found his way there at the right moment and the world had shaken hands with it. He helped me with my bag even though I protested. In the kitchen, the light fell familiar across the table, and Gus pressed against my legs like a dog's love letter. I told him everything, the parts I liked, the parts that felt like someone else's coat I could put on, but that didn't fit me the way I'd hoped. He listened, and I could tell he had already decided he would support me either way. Then I told him what I wanted, as straight as I could. I want to stay, I said. Here, with you. If you want that too. Sam closed his eyes like a prayer and opened them like an answer. Yes. Then he added, because he was him, I'll support you no matter what, but I am very glad. We celebrated by ordering too much Thai food and watching the kind of movie that leaves the room quiet at the end. Not because anyone died, but because something true was said out loud in a way you felt lucky to hear. By fall, the maple out front went red again, as if to point to the exact year that had passed and say, look, you stood, you made choices, you were kind sometimes, you were not always gracious. You went to the hardware store more than you planned. You learned how to fix a leaky faucet and how to set down a grudge. You made soup on a night the world felt mean. You held a hand that steadied you, and when someone needed yours, you lifted it. We did not rush anything still even then. We did not build grand elaborate plans for 5 years out. We did make one change to the arrangement that had started it all. We sat down at the table with the lease and a cup of coffee and the little tin of paper clips that for some reason always made me feel like an adult. We talked about power and fairness and the way we wanted to live. I want to be not your room owner, Sam said with a smile that lived in 2 places on his face at once. And I want you to be not my tenant. I thought about the shoes I had on then, the way my bag dug into my shoulder. The part of me that had been sure the kind of love I wanted had a timer that had run out. I'd say, I answered, you can put your bag down. You don't have to be brave all at once. There's a dog who will learn your footstep. There's a man who will remember how you take your coffee. Steadiness isn't boring. It's the road you get to rest on while you look at the scenery. Sam nodded like we'd settled something, not just for then, but for all the days ahead. I would say to the version of me who opened the door, he added, be the porch light you wished for when you were young. And trust that someone will come along who knows how to use a key. We blew out the candle and went upstairs, our hands finding each other in the dim the way hands learn to. If there is a moral to our story, I think it is this. Love grows when you mix respect with curiosity, when you leave space and fill it with kindness, when you honor what brought you together, like a room for rent and a hopeful knock, and build something larger that doesn't forget where it started. My room owner will always be part of our beginning, but when I introduce him now, I say, this is Sam. And then, if the person is kind and the day is good, this is my partner. And sometimes privately, when no one is listening except the part of me that once needed to be held still enough to steady, I say, this is my home.